to lead a workshop entitled Zen and the Art of Mindfulness for Planetary Health. Dr. Vo is a pediatrician specializing in adolescent medicine, founding co-director of the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness, and a clinical associate professor and division head for the Division of Adolescent Health and Medicine, Department of Pediatrics at BC Children's Hospital, and the UBC Faculty of Medicine in Vancouver. In partnership with Dr. Jake Locke, Dr. Vo co-developed MARS-A, and this stands for Mindful Awareness and Resilient Skills for Adolescents, an 8-week mindfulness training program for adolescents with depressive symptoms, with or without co-occurring chronic illness or chronic pain. Dr. Vo also developed a mindful healing course for healthcare providers, adapted from mindful practice and other sources. It's quite an intro. I'm so happy to have you with us here today. And without further talking, I'll let you take it away, Dr. Vo.
Hi there. Thank you, Alexis, for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for joining today. It's a real honor to be a part of this and to bring together some of my strongest interests, which include mindfulness and planetary health and mental health. So I'm really happy to be here with you. And I'd like to start off with territorial acknowledgement, bringing a mindfulness element into it, because one of the things I hope to share with you today is that mindfulness can be part of everything we do, including territorial acknowledgements. And so I'm going to share with you one that I learned from Dr. Ellie Parton, who is an Indigenous physician and a colleague of mine who works in Victoria, British Columbia. And we're working on some really cool mindfulness projects together. So I would invite you to, first of all, get present as best you can in your bodies. And so that means finding, first of all, a position that is as comfortable as you can be right now, whether it's standing, sitting, or lying down. Connecting with your breath. And feeling your body, the points of contact on the ground, your body in the chair. Not needing to change or fix anything. Simply bringing awareness to your body just as it is. And now connecting with the land, bringing an embodied presence to the land, not just thinking about the land, but feeling it in your body. So this could mean looking outside the window if you happen to have a window nearby. It could mean feeling your feet on the ground. It could mean looking at an object in nature that you might have in your room, like a plant or an animal. Bringing awareness to that connection, feeling the support of the earth, noticing your surroundings in the present moment. And bringing awareness to the Indigenous presence on the lands that you are on, naming them if you know. For myself, I am in the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, also known as Vancouver. And bringing awareness to the peoples on these lands who have been on these lands for a long time and who continue to be on these lands today. And then acknowledging your relationship with the land. What is your connection? How did you arrive here? What is your intention with the Indigenous peoples of this land? And then to close, you can bring your attention back to the room. Open your eyes if they've been closed, noticing the sounds, noticing your breath, and noticing each other as well. And I love to see faces, so if you're able to turn your cameras on, that's lovely. If you can't, I understand it also, but it's really nice to be able to see each other even through these virtual rooms. So thank you for joining me in that practice. So I want to talk a little bit about climate distress and how mindfulness can relate to this. So we know that climate distress is an enormous issue, climate anxiety, climate change distress. There's many words in the literature, and there's a lot of scientific literature on this, including some major publications from The Lancet, which is one of the preeminent medical journals, showing that climate anxiety is a major mental health issue, especially for young people. And when I talk to young people, I hear from them, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. They didn't choose the current climate crisis. They didn't have, and they in fact didn't really benefit as much from it as the previous generations. Yet they are the ones who are suffering the consequences and being expected to solve it. And I see it in my own family. I have family in California, and some of them had to evacuate because of the wildfires just a few weeks ago. And I'm sure many of you have similar experience as well, because climate change doesn't just affect one place or one type of people. So this is really an existential question about the future of humanity, and how can we manage that? How can we be present with that? How can we cope with that? And how can mindfulness help? That's really what I want to explore today. How can mindfulness help? How can it be a positive force? How can it motivate us to positive action instead of despair? And of course, it's very easy to experience despair when we look at the scope of the crisis. So to do that, I'm going to share a little bit about what mindfulness is and what mindfulness means for mental health, first of all, just because I'm not sure what all our background is in mindfulness. So this is a calligraphy by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who has taught me pretty much everything I know about mindfulness, and I've had the privilege to be able to study with him directly. He's a Vietnamese Zen monk, and I'll be referring to him throughout this conversation. So the top symbol here means presence, and the bottom one means heart. So one way of translating mindfulness, which is actually a very ancient Sanskrit word that in English we call it mindfulness, we could also translate it as heartfulness, or presence of the heart, or being present to what's in the heart. So presence is a big part of it, but it's not just about the mind. It's about the mind, the body, the heart, and of all of our relationships as well. Here's the way that I like to define mindfulness. Again, I'm not very committed to any of these definitions, though, because mindfulness is really about experiencing it, not defining it, thinking about conceptualizing it. It's a practice. It's a way of life. But here I've borrowed Jon Kabat-Zinn's very famous definition. Jon Kabat-Zinn brought mindfulness into Western medicine and Western healthcare. He was certainly very influenced by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh and by many Buddhist traditions that go back thousands of years. He defined it as paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and without judgment. So here I've borrowed his definition, but adjusted it a little bit. Instead of without judgment, I like to say unconditional love. And that means showing up with love to whatever it is we're experiencing, whether it's inside of us, our own distress, our own pain in our bodies and our hearts and our minds, as well as to the situation, to the environment, and in fact, to the earth. And so that's going to be a theme of today as well, is how do we show up with love for the earth? And mindfulness has several mindful qualities. So mindfulness is like two wings of a bird. And a lot of the discourse around mindfulness is about present moment awareness and concentration. And that's a big part of it. And those are things that we can train. But that's only one wing. If we're present, moment aware, and concentrated, but we're facing pain and difficulty, then we need this other wing in order to fly, in order for mindfulness to be helpful and healing. Otherwise, we're just present to distress and despair, and that can actually cause more suffering. So I'd like to share a few of the mindful qualities. I boiled them down to 3 qualities, which I share with the teenagers that I teach mindfulness to. First one is beginner's mind. So I want you to remember the last time that you were walking with a young child, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years old, down a beach or a forest path. What was it like for that young person? They found everything interesting, fascinating, full of awe and wonder. A sand, a rock, a shell, a leaf. So this is beginner's mind. They're experiencing this reality as if for the very first time, because maybe it is the very first time for them. Beginner's mind is something that we can all invite to our own experience, even if we are not quote unquote beginners, even if it's something that we have experienced many times. So when we walk down that beach, when we walk down that forest trail, or when we're doing something maybe that seems very mundane, like brushing our teeth or putting our shoes on or having our coffee in the morning, can we bring that same curiosity, that same beginner's mind, maybe letting go of what we think this is all about, letting go of even our own perceptions and being open to learning and discovering. And I experience this all the time. One story I like to tell is there's a beautiful tree on the campus of my hospital, and I must have walked by this tree like 1,000 times before, but there was one day where for whatever reason, I had more of a beginner's mind as I was walking down, across the hospital campus, and I noticed it as if for the very first time. And really just took a moment to enjoy it and to appreciate it. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have that beginner's mind. And then I also wonder, well, why didn't I notice it? Those 100 other times I walked past. Well, it's because I was an autopilot. I was trying to get to another place. I was not in the present moment. I was thinking about where I needed to be. Another mindful quality is loving kindness. We could also call this friendliness. We could also call this compassion. Whatever words you want to use, I don't get too attached to language. But this is really this quality of wanting the best, of wanting to care for. And you can think about if you have a pet, or you've raised a child, you've held a baby in your arms, or a puppy or a kitten. What was that experience that you felt in that moment? Wanting that being to be protected, feeling the preciousness of that relationship. That's loving kindness. And this is, again, something that we can practice, learn, and grow. And then the third quality is self-compassion. And I understand that we're going to have a workshop that's dedicated to this topic. But what I would say for now is that many of us in the service professions or the healing work, mental health, we naturally can practice compassion for those we serve, but it might be harder to do that for ourselves. The practice of self-compassion is, first of all, recognizing that we deserve it just as much as those other people. And in fact, we cannot show up at our best in our service work if we don't know how to bring that compassion, turn it inwards first. And so there's very simple practices that we can do. Here's one that I do all the time throughout the day, and it takes 5 or 10 seconds. So I'm going to invite you to join me in this, is simply putting your hand on your heart and taking a few breaths. And the hand on heart is a gesture of kindness. It's like giving yourself a hug. Just tuning into what you're feeling. So I would invite you maybe to do that during your day, especially when you're experiencing a difficult moment. So I want to share some of the benefits of mindfulness. There's been a lot of research. This study or this graph shows the peer-reviewed literature on mindfulness for the past several decades, showing that in the 80s, there was very little research on it. But since the 90s and especially the 2000s, it's really taken off, and the literature has exploded tremendously. And now there's hundreds of publications every year. And we're finding benefits for anxiety, for stress, for depression, for focus, for our relationships, for pain management. So it turns out that mindfulness is now an evidence-based intervention for mental health as well as physical health. And I'll just show you one highlight, which I really love, which is about mindfulness and the brain. So this was a study looking at a mindfulness training program called TERA, Training for Awareness, Resilience, and Action for adolescents with depression. And what it showed was that mindfulness training, the adolescents who went through this had changes in the brain, especially in the areas of the brain, such as the amygdala, that have a lot to do with emotional regulation and trauma. And that adolescents who went through this program had changes in the brain that could be seen and measured. And to me, as an adolescent medicine specialist, this makes a lot of sense because I already know that adolescents are developing their brain very rapidly. The ages between about 12 and 24 are a period of intense, rapid brain development. Just as much brain development happens during those ages as the first 5 years of life. So it's a time of opportunity. It's a time of vulnerability as well. And the way the brain changes has a lot to do with life experience and pathways that are used in the brain. And mindfulness is a great example of a pathway that's used because mindfulness is a practice, like taking those 3 breaths, putting your hands on the heart. This is something that we can do over and over and over again, thousands, hundreds of thousands of times in our lives. And the more we do this, the more that activates certain brain pathways that are associated with resilience, compassion. So it becomes hardwired in our brain. And if adolescents can do this during this time of intense brain development and neuroplasticity, then it can lay the groundwork for a brain that is hardwired to be more resilient. On the other hand, if they don't learn how to do this, they may turn to other coping mechanisms such as substances or self-harm or disordered eating. And that can also lay the brain work for lifelong unhealthy behaviors as well. So adolescence is a really critical window of opportunity as well as vulnerability. And this is also, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is also the people, the demographic that has experienced climate distress the most. So I think we can bring what we know about mindfulness to this population that's experiencing climate distress anxiety. Thich Nhat Hanh has a famous saying and even a book by this title called Peace is Every Step. And what this makes me think of is what is sometimes called informal mindfulness. Now I'm liking to call it spontaneous mindfulness. And this is the type of mindfulness where we don't have to necessarily take a lot of extra time because we're very busy. We have a lot going on in our lives, and we may have time to meditate, go on retreats, etc. And I love those things, and I definitely recommend those things. But if you don't have time, mindfulness can also be practiced just in everyday life, doing the things that we already do, such as I mentioned before, drinking our coffee, walking across the hospital, driving. And in fact, this kind of spontaneous or informal mindfulness might be even more important than what is sometimes called formal mindfulness or dedicated mindfulness, where we take time to, meditate and those kinds of things. And in my experience, they actually really go together. So I would encourage everyone who's not already doing this to maybe find something in your daily life that you do sometimes in autopilot. You're thinking about getting to the next place or doing the next thing. Maybe it's washing the dishes. That was actually the first informal mindfulness practice that I learned. And then instead of doing it in that normal way of being an autopilot, just trying to get it done so you can move on to the next thing, bring those mindful qualities to it. Bring present moment awareness, beginner's mind, loving kindness, self-compassion, and see if your experience of washing the dishes or having your coffee or driving to work, see if that's any different. Another critical, important part of mindfulness is turning towards suffering. And this is very counterintuitive and very hard to do. So mindfulness is simple, but it's not easy. As human beings, we have a tendency to turn away from suffering. We don't want to experience difficult things. It's like what Cookie Monster says, I want to live in the present moment unless it's unpleasant. I want to live in the present moment unless it's unpleasant, in which case I'd rather eat a cookie. So mindfulness actually teaches us to turn towards suffering, to be with it, with those mindful qualities, with an open mind and open heart. And so I would include pain in here, and I would also include climate anxiety in here. So with mindfulness, we can learn how to be present with our distress around the climate crisis, learn how to be present with our fear, our despair, our anger even, our frustration, and that will help us to face it in a different way. And when we face it in a different way and act to change it, this goes by many names. I like to call it engaged mindfulness. And this is a photograph of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh with the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and they were very close friends. And Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh brought mindfulness into his activism, and he came of age during the Vietnam War. And so for him, mindfulness was a practice of making peace during a time of war. And he saw, immense destruction. Many of his friends and students were killed. His country was being destroyed. And this is personal for me because I'm also Vietnamese. So this is my family story also. And he brought mindfulness into his work as a peace activist. So he said meditation is not to escape from society, but to come back to ourselves and see what's going on. Mindfulness must be engaged. Once there's seeing, there must be acting. Otherwise, what's the use of seeing? With mindfulness, we'll know what to do and what not to do to be of help. So I really love this quote because it reminds us that mindfulness is not just about turning inwards and taking care of ourselves. That's part of it, but then we also turn outwards and take care of each other and take care of the society with those same mindful qualities. And I do think that in the popular culture there is a little bit of a mythology that mindfulness is, self-absorbed. It's being selfish. It's about escaping. It's about closing your eyes to what's happening in the world. And that's not my experience, and that's not the mindfulness traditions that I've been trained in. Mindfulness is about both turning inwards and turning outwards, and in fact, not seeing a difference between the inner and the outer. More recently, we've had the work of people like Kristen Neff and Chris Germer, who have written and researched a lot on the topic of self-compassion. And in the first, decade of the field of self-compassion, it was very much that inner work. It was about, doing that hand on heart practice, for example. It was about being kind and compassionate to ourselves when we're experiencing distress. But in the past, probably 7 or 8 years, they've really been looking more at the flip side of that, which is fierce self-compassion. So, an analogy would be like a bear. And when a bear's tending their cubs, a mama bear, they're feeding, they're nurturing. But then when there's a threat, a mama bear can get quite fierce as well. So the energy of fierce self-compassion is really about is about setting boundaries. It's about protecting. It's about saying no to things that are harmful. It's about making change in order to reduce suffering. And so the inner self-compassion and the fierce self-compassion really go together. Maybe not all at the same time, but they balance each other out like yin and yang. And then taking action. So this is another meditation teacher who I really love, Larry Yang, who's a social worker in the United States, and also a meditation teacher. And he said, mindfulness allows us the space to create skillful, meaningful, and transformative action. It allows our action in the world to come from a deep recognition of the causes and conditions of our lives so that change can emerge from the unencumbered goodness of our hearts and minds, rather than arising from the place of our wounds or our injuries. It's this goodness that makes our path noble. So mindfulness is really about how do we make change. It's not about do we make change or not. We do, and we need to in a climate crisis. But mindfulness can change the quality of that work and therefore the results of that work as well. Another quote that I love, and we're posting this in our hospital actually, is from Thich Nhat Hanh: the quality of our being determines the quality of our doing. The quality of our being determines the quality of our doing. So we have to start with the inner work, and that will change the quality of our outer work. And then what can that outer work look like? Again, from Thich Nhat Hanh. And if you want to do a deep dive in his teachings on this topic, by the way, I highly recommend his book called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, which really goes into how the inner work and the outer work are deeply connected. So he talks about, these three personalities that we need to have in our society, and maybe even as individuals, we have elements of all three of those. So one is the meditator. So this is, the person who has a solid grounding in this mindfulness and these qualities that I mentioned: love, compassion, seeing the interconnectedness between us all. So having that insight and that wisdom that we need to do this work effectively. And then there's the warrior. So this is the person who is able to take concrete action, who is able to, speak the truth, who's able to summon their courage and inspire others, even when speaking the truth and taking action is difficult or unpopular. And then the third is the artist. So this is, bringing joy and creativity into that work. That's what makes it sustainable. That's what makes it rewarding. That's what makes it inspiring to others, is bringing creativity and joy into our work, rather than, only anger and blaming and judging. I mean, there's a role for all of those things as well. So I don't want to say like we shouldn't be angry. There's reasons to be angry. But if we're stuck there, then our work is not going to be as sustainable. It's not going to be as effective, and in fact, may cause more harm. So I'll give some examples of how this might look in real life. So one teaching that we learn from mindfulness is that everything needs food to survive, and that's true of our own minds as well. And so we can be mindful, we can be aware of what are we consuming in our own minds through media consumption, through news consumption. Are we consuming things that are healthy for our mind? Just like when we eat foods, are we consuming foods that are healthy for our bodies? Are we consuming media, news, information, conversations that are helpful for our minds? And so, these are two opposite examples. So, we've seen that toxic social media can have an effect on people's behaviors in very harmful ways. And as an adolescent medicine specialist, that's also something I'm very concerned by. And then we can also see that when we consume things like nature, for example, and when I say consume, I put that in air quotes, but it's like we're being present with it, we're being mindful of it, and it's penetrating our consciousness. That can also be quite healing. So one practice I would ask us to consider is mindfulness of consumption. How are we spending our time? Where are we putting our energy? Where are we putting our attention? Are we present in the moment as we consume media or as we consume nature? And are we aware of the effects that it's having on us? So when we're consuming media in a way, for example, we're doom scrolling, we're feeling more anxious, more agitated, and not in a way that's going to help us to take positive action, then that awareness can help us to make a decision about maybe I'm done for today, or maybe I need to take a social media detox, or avoid the news for a day or a week or a month, because it's not helping me to live in the present moment and act in a way that's aligned with my values. Another deep teaching, which comes from many lines of science, including mindfulness, but also a lot of research, is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, this awareness that we are deeply interconnected with each other and with the earth. So here's some lines of inquiry that look at that. One is ecological systems theory, which is a line of research from Bronfenbrenner and many others that looks at health and looks at how our individual health is not just determined by our biology and our genetics, but also by our social environment, by the entire society, and by time. So this really gives rise to a whole field of research and health intervention that's sometimes called social determinants of health, that we can't just look at the individual, but we have to look at the entire context. Another line of research is interpersonal neurobiology, and Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's a psychiatrist, is one of the leaders in this field. And this is looking at the ways of how our interpersonal relationships influence our brains, our immune systems, our cardiac systems, and works in both directions. So when we have healthy relationships, our bodies are healthier. And when our bodies are healthier, then that helps us to have healthier relationships. So again, health is not an individual matter. Another line is epigenetics. And this is research looking at how our relationships and experiences, especially traumatic experiences, can influence how our genes are expressed, can influence our aging process, and can influence many biological processes such as our immune system, how we fight cancer, etc. So our life experience is not just in the mind or the brain, but it gets embedded in the body as well and expressed in physical illness too. So the mind and the body are not separate, and individuals are not separate. And then, we have people like Einstein, who said a human being is part of a whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion and to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. So these are grand visions. I'll share another quote by Dr. King in a minute. But these are not just, things that we can grasp intellectually, but with mindfulness practice, these are things that we can feel in our body, just like with the opening territorial acknowledgement that I offered. These are things that we can feel in our body and that we can train ourselves so that way when we take action, when we speak, when we act, when we make decisions, it's coming from this deep awareness. It's not just like an idea. So one other line of inquiry that I've been really interested in is what we're learning about how trees communicate. And, we used to think that trees are individuals just like humans, but a lot of more recent research has showing that trees are deeply interconnected underneath the ground. They communicate with each other. And so the entire forest can be seen as one organism rather than looking at one individual tree. And it's the same with human beings. So I think all of these lines of research are really encouraging us to break out of this hyper individualism that I think is at the basis of a lot of economies, a lot of cultures, especially in the West, which are at the basis of our climate crisis. Also seeing, us as separate from nature, seeing as nature as just something that we can extract and profit from. So here's that other quote that I wanted to share from Dr. King. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. So again, this is another expression of this insight of interbeing that I mentioned earlier. And so how does this apply to climate? How does this apply to how we relate to the Earth? So again, another quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. This is really about how we see the Earth, and our insight into our relationship with the Earth. The way we see the world shapes the way we treat it. If a mountain is a deity, not a pile of ore, if a forest is a sacred grove, not just timber, if other species are biological kin, not mere resources, and if the planet is our mother, not an opportunity, then we will treat each other and the Earth with greater respect. The challenge is to see the world from a different perspective. So changing, dealing with the climate crisis involves many things. I'm here to argue that it's not just about, policies, economics. All of those are important, but it's not enough, because if we don't change our mindset, if we don't change the way we understand our relationship with the Earth through this lens of interbeing, then we will never come up with the right policies, and we will continue to come up with the wrong policies. So we really have to change our fundamental view of the Earth and of ourselves. And so, how do we do that? It's not just about thinking about it, but again, this is practice, and this is about embedding it in our bodies. So that way, it's not just something we think about, but something we know on a very deep, physical, even cellular level. So I'm going to share some examples of the way we do that next. And so what I'm going to offer now is a meditation. It's a contemplative meditation. And contemplation means a long, loving look. So I'm going to invite us to get present, enjoy a few breaths, and get back into our bodies. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. And again, if you have access to some elements of nature right now, I would invite you to connect with it. Looking out a window, touching a plant, feeling the ground beneath you. And then I'm going to read something called basically a love letter to the Earth. And I'm going to invite you to listen to it in a mindful way, contemplate it, which means not necessarily engaging it with your intellect, trying to decide if you agree or disagree or take notes or anything like that, but simply instead allowing these words to penetrate your mind, your body, and your consciousness, and just being curious what you notice in your body. Dear Mother Earth, beloved Mother of all things, I bow my head before you as I look deeply. I recognize that you are present in me and that I'm a part of you. I was born from you and you are always present, offering me everything I need for my nourishment and my growth. My mother, my father, and all my ancestors are also your children. We breathe your fresh air. We drink your clean water. We eat your nourishing food. Your herbs heal us when we're sick. You are the mother of all beings. I call you by the human name Mother, and yet I know your mothering nature is more vast and ancient than humans. We are just one young species of your many children. All the millions of other species who have ever lived on Earth are also your children. You are not a person, but I know you are not less than a person either. You are a living, breathing being in the form of a planet. Each species has its own language, yet as our mother, you can understand us all. That is why you can hear me today as I open my heart to you, and I offer you my prayer. Dear Mother Earth, wherever there is soil, water, rock, or air, you are there nourishing me and giving me life. You are present in every cell of my body. My physical body is your physical body. And just as the sun and stars are present in you, they are also present in me. You are not outside of me, and I am not outside of you. You are more than just my environment. You are nothing less than myself. I promise to keep the awareness alive that you are always in me and I'm always in you. I promise to be aware that your health and well-being is my own health and well-being. I know I need to keep this awareness alive in me for us both to be peaceful, happy, healthy, and strong. Sometimes I forget. lost in the confusion and worries of daily life. I forget that my body is your body, and sometimes even forget that I have a body at all. Unaware of the presence of my body and the beautiful planet around me and within me, I am unable to cherish and celebrate the precious gift of life you have given me. Dear Mother, my deep wish is to wake up to the miracle of life. I promise to train myself to be present for myself, my life, and for you in every moment. I know that my true presence is the best gift I can offer you to the one I love. So that was A Love Letter to Mother Earth by Thich Nhat Hanh. And then I'll move to another meditation. It's a tree meditation. So this is being aware that the trees are our lungs outside of us, and that our lungs are the tree's leaves outside of the tree. So again, connecting with breathing. Breathing in, aware, my in-breath is the out-breath of the tree. Breathing in oxygen is the out-breath of the leaves of the tree, the grass and all the green things. And then breathing out, my out-breath is the in-breath of the tree, breathing out carbon dioxide, allowing the tree, the grass, and all the green things to inhale it. Breathing in, receiving oxygen from the tree. Breathing out, offering carbon dioxide to the tree. Breathing in, receiving the moisture from the clouds. Breathing out, returning the moisture back to the clouds. Breathing in and out, inviting deep awareness of my connection to the earth, my relationship with the earth. With every breath, I am here with the earth, and the earth is here with me. Then letting go of the meditations. Sometimes after a still meditation, I like to maybe shake or stretch, rub, tap, massage my eyes. Okay, so thank you for joining those practices with me. So I just want to share a few kind of practical mindfulness practices we can do as well. So this is one from the BC Parks Foundation, which is Park RX. And this is something that is available to health professionals, definitely physicians. I'm not sure about non-physicians, but basically we write a prescription, just like we would write a prescription for a medication. We write a prescription to be up in the earth. And this website has a lot of kind of very practical resources and ways to access nature, which can be healing. And then when we are in touch with the earth, and we are more likely to love the earth, care for the earth, and reverse climate crisis. Another one is in the way we eat. So this is a project I'm working on at my hospital, where we're going to have this mural placed in the cafeteria. And this is about mindful eating and being aware of the sensations of eating, as well as making choices in the way we eat in a way that helps sustain the earth. So it's about savoring each moment, enjoying every bite, breathing mindfully in each moment, thanking the earth and the labor and care for everyone who brought this food to us. That includes the farmers, the cooks, the cafeteria workers. Listening to our bodies, nourishing our body's needs, intuitive eating. And this is a real remedy for disordered eating, body image concerns, and that's part of my kind of everyday work as well. So learning how to eat what our body needs. Choosing foods that care for the earth. So if we're aware of our relationship with the earth, maybe we'll choose foods in a way that is more sustainable. And then accepting the food, so that way we can live with love as possible. So we deserve to eat. So there's no shame, there's no judgment here. We're part of the earth is part of us, and we accept the gift that the earth gives us with gratitude. So this is something that I think people can practice, they can bring into their homes, they can bring into their workplaces. This is also called sometimes it's called the 5 contemplations, so you can look that up as well. There's many different versions of this. And then in our workplaces, in our healthcare workplaces in particular, bringing invitations to bring our awareness to the earth and to nature and to enjoying it. So this is a project that I'm also working on. We're calling it Mindful Spaces. And this is at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. If you're ever in Vancouver, I encourage you to come. It's open to the public. Just take the main elevators of the main tower to the 5th floor, and you can enjoy this fantastic view of downtown Vancouver, of the mountains, and then bring some mindfulness into the space too. So, for example, mindful walking, being aware of the mountains and the sky, and this can be really healing for our mental health as well as connecting us to the earth. And in British Columbia and all of Canada, we're very lucky that we have this access, and we want to take care of it. So these are just further examples. So we have some poetry on mindful walking, and we've got a labyrinth, where we can practice mindful walking, and then some more poetry here. So these are examples of how we can bring mindfulness to our daily lives and even in our workplaces. So I hope other workplaces can bring some mindfulness to theirs as well. And then the last thing I want to share with you, kind of like a mindfulness practice, is by Dr. Michelle Chapman. She's a mindfulness teacher, an anthropologist, a friend of mine. And I really love this practice, and it's very simple. The words are, I am here, I am safe, I am worthy, I am enough. And for me, this is an antidote to insecurity, to feeling insecure, to feeling unworthy, to feeling imposter syndrome, which many of us in the helping professions experience. And I really love the way that Michelle does this as well. She does it, teaches it as music, as song. And this is certainly from her own cultural tradition as well, going back thousands of years, that, song, especially in community, when we sing together, this is something that, people have known for thousands of years. When we sing together, our bodies connect, our nervous systems connect, and it can be very healing. So I'm going to play actually a short version of this recording, but it's freely available as well. And I hope the sound works. Maybe give me a thumbs down if you're not hearing sound in about 5 seconds.
I am here, and I am safe. I am worthy. I am enough.
Words are simple. I invite you to say or sing them.
I am here, and I am safe. I am worthy, and I am enough. You are here, and you are safe. You are worthy. You are enough. And we are here, and we are safe. We are worthy, and we are enough. Yes, we are enough.
Hope you enjoyed that meditation. I love that one. I learned it about a year ago and I practice it all the time. So just a few closing words. What's not mindfulness? There's a lot of hype about what mindfulness is. It's been kind of commodified. And I just want to share mindfulness is not a way to kind of, make more money, to be more productive necessarily, although it might lead to that, or a substitute for addressing some of the systemic problems, some of the environmental problems in our workplaces, in our culture. It's not a shortcut. It's a lifelong path. We can access it right away, and we can also, make it part of our lives for the rest of our lives if we choose to. So with that, I invite you all to connect with the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness. We offer lots of resources for mindfulness for both youth and children, for health professionals, as well as for parents and caregivers. For those of you who are health professionals, we have just started offering a mindful community, because mindfulness has to be done in community, or it's best done in community, I should say. So we have a program called Wakeful Wednesdays, which is an online mindfulness gathering once a month in the early evenings. I think it starts at 5:15 to 6 p.m., so 45 minutes once a month. For health professionals in BC, including trainees and students of any discipline, medicine, social work, research, administration, nursing, anything. So we would love for you to join us there. You can find out more information on our website. And I think with that, I'm going to stop my slides. And if one of our hosts would like to help facilitate some discussion or questions and answers, I'm happy to do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Vo. That was beautiful. Looking through the chat, I think a lot of people really enjoyed that, and also maybe bringing up some emotions. So thank you for that. It's a beautiful respite from every day. So thank you. Now I invite people to ask any questions to Dr. Vo in the Q&A. Let's see.
Yeah, I can see the chat. I don't know if I'm seeing the Q&A. Am I seeing the Q&A?
Q&A there. The Q&A is a button. We don't have anything in the Q&A at the moment. I think people are still just
putting it in the chat. Yeah, I see a lot of comments in the chat. Yeah, thank you.
And really just feeling that. And so can you talk a little bit about your work with adolescents and climate distress? And are you seeing an increase? And if so, how do you feel that the mindfulness is working with them? Do you see teens and adolescents becoming practitioners of mindfulness? If you could just expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been teaching mindfulness to teenagers for about 15 years now, and I've certainly seen many of them develop it and become, make it a practice that I hear about years later. And so I'll just share one very recent example. Actually, I'll share two very recent examples. I recently ran into a colleague at the hospital who I didn't really know. So we were just introducing ourselves. And I said, I'm Dr. Vo. And she said, Dr. Vo, you don't remember this, but I remember you from when I was a teenager, 12 years ago, and I took your mindfulness course. And it's made a real difference for me. And now I'm working here, and so we're colleagues. And so that was an important, part of her path. Another one, I got an email from about a year ago from a medical student at UBC, and she said, Dr. Vo, I took your mindfulness course when I was a teenager, and I had, significant health issues. Now I'm in medical school, and I continue to practice mindfulness, and that's partly why I decided to become a doctor, and I want to learn more about mindfulness and how can I help. And so now we're working on a project to improve our programs and to kind of redevelop some of our curriculum together. So another colleague and student. So I have no doubt that mindfulness that teenagers can learn mindfulness and practice it. And then we also have some kind of, more traditional research that shows this as well. But to be honest with you, these stories actually mean a little bit more to me than kind of like the traditional research. In terms of climate change, this is something that comes up a lot in our mindfulness for teens courses. The course is not specifically about climate change, but it's about whatever is causing distress for teenagers, and that's one of the big things right now. And so, we just use the practices, some of them I've shared today, and also the other practices that we share with teenagers as part of our regular curriculum, and we use it to hold the distress of climate change. I don't know if anyone's specifically, looked at that research-wise or collecting data on that, but anecdotally, I can definitely say that it's been helpful for young people to hold their distress and cope with, anxiety and depression and hopelessness from all kinds of sources, including climate change being one of the ones that we hear about a lot right now.
Great, thanks very much. We have a question in the Q&A from Naomi. And she writes, I understand there's been some effort to incorporate mindfulness practices in schools. Are you aware of a BC-wide program for elementary or middle high school?
Yeah, mindfulness has gotten into a lot of schools. I think it really depends on which school and which district that you're in. So it seems very kind of inconsistent, but Mind Up is one of the big programs that's in lots of schools, and it was actually developed here in BC and researched here in BC and then kind of spread throughout the world. So certainly that's one of the big ones, but there are many others as well. I'll just give another plug for those of you who are interested, and maybe I'll see if I can put a link in the chat as well. But there's going to be an upcoming conference, which I'm a part of, which is all about mindfulness for youth, including it's going to have many educators there, people who are doing mindfulness in schools. And there's lots of other networks. There's a mindfulness in education network also, people across the world who are bringing mindfulness into schools. So there's a lot of that happening, but it's not uniform. It's very inconsistent. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I remember the Mind Up program. Wow, my kids would use that too. And if I was getting a bit stressed, they would say, Mom, Mind Up. And
Yeah,
it was very cool.
exactly.
I think we have a question here from Megan. I see a hand up. Did you want to ask a question, Megan? I think you're muted, Megan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vo. I really enjoyed your presentation as well. I wondered if you have at all spoken to or considered over and above kind of the mindfulness and the spiritual practices around the protective and the involvement of religious bodies in the work of protection against mental health and involvement in climate change. As a person of faith, I definitely am very cognizant of the shifts that we've seen in our society over the last 20 to 30 years in terms of the amount of folks who are or who identify with different religious types of religion. And I wonder, one of my good friends is a psychiatrist, and she said that, I see very few people in my practice who are actively involved in a faith community. And mindfulness is, of course, another aspect of our spiritual selves. And I know that it's definitely felt that being a religious person is much less modern or cool, potentially, or is accepted. And there's been a lot of stuff over the last decade or two that has been potentially people might even feel ashamed of being a religious person as opposed to spiritual. So I actually haven't looked closely at the fulsome agenda to see if there is any kind of aspect or angle of kind of more from an organized religion perspective within this space. But I've been thinking about it a lot, and I just thought I'd bring that up at this table because we do have a spiritual component to our lives, whether we're part of a religion or not. And I just want to make sure that we're all coming to the table and we're able to come to the table with our full selves, whether we identify with a religion or not. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, as you'll noticed in my presentation, I referred to many spiritual leaders and teachers like Dr. King and Thich Nhat Hanh. And to me, this deep awareness of interbeing, that is a spiritual practice, is to be aware of our true nature, our deepest nature of connection to the earth and to each other. How that looks for different people may be different, though. In terms of organized religion, I don't know a lot about many religions. All I know mostly about the Buddhist tradition, and certainly climate awareness has been a major part of the community that practices Buddhism, engaged Buddhism, following Thich Nhat Hanh. And there's, thousands of people, organized communities throughout the world, including in Canada. And they've written and done a lot of work on that. I think when I talk to Indigenous friends and colleagues, a lot of the kind of awareness of and insights of interbeing and relationship with the earth is very resonant with many Indigenous spiritual traditions as well. I can't really speak to other organized religions or traditions, but I would suspect that there are some deep insights in traditions throughout the world, whether they're, maybe talked about as much or practiced or a part of the communities or teachings. I can't really say, but I think this is something that we all have in common as part of our kind of human heritage, and we can kind of look at those and strengthen those, and that can be definitely a big part of our response to the climate and caring for the climate. I'm seeing some comments on that one about the Pope. So yeah, those are things that I don't know as much of, but I'm sure they're out there.
Great. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting another message. Yes, so there's a question in the chat from Will. I appreciated the weaving of interbeing with social determinants of health. On community-based climate resilience, I wonder how local programming and mindfulness could practically help build cohesion, sense of place, and action.
Yeah, I would really encourage everyone to either join or form a community of mindfulness wherever you live, or bring it into your communities or your organizations that you're already working in and with. So for example, for me at my workplace, we start most of our meetings, at least the ones that I facilitate, we always start it with a moment of mindfulness and some short meditation. And so it becomes part of our culture. And so if you're working in a place of action, if you're, an activist or working in a socially engaged organization, you can bring mindfulness to that. You can, and first of all, you have to develop your own mindfulness practice first. So that's where it comes from. And then you find a friend, a colleague who also has similar interests, and then you start bringing mindfulness into your meetings, into your work, so that way your organization becomes more of a mindful culture. And this doesn't happen overnight. This takes a lot of time, but that's exactly how the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness started, 15 years ago. And that's, I've shown you some of the things that we've done since then, but we planted the seeds 15 years ago.
Wow, come a long way. Fantastic. Okay, we have another question from Ashley. Hi, Dr. Vo. Your presentation has been grounding and beautiful. I'd like to look more into many of the things you've shared with us today, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your slides with us.
Let's see. I think there is going to be a recording of this, and I'm happy to share a PDF of my slides with the conference organizers, and then maybe you can contact them for distribution. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So I think, let's see. One more. Oh, and there's more information in the chat about more faith-based organizations around climate as well. So please have a look there, everybody. Great. So with that, we'll draw this session to a close. Dr. Vo, thank you so much. That was a wonderful workshop, and I think it's what a lot of us needed after feeling a lot of stress around the climate. So thank you, and best of luck with all your work. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you all.